So let's get right into it. We're here to talk about inspiration, and why not have someone from a company called Inspire Core lead us on a discussion about inspiration. I have known Laura now for gosh, a couple of years.
Yeah.
A couple of years. Our universes collided. And they collided pretty hard. You and I just talked about this crazy idea. If anyone remembers who's been part of our SIP session events, we thought, why not do something really high risk, which was let everyone that's coming to these SIP sessions tell us the gnarliest topic that they would love to see covered in a SIP session. And of course, we were given a list of things, and there was one item on that list. They were all controversial, but there was one item on that list. It was like, oh, there's no way we could take that conversation on. No way. And then, of course, we knew that that was exactly the conversation we needed to take on, which happened in a very cozy and romantic environment at the Republic in Hartford. Who of you were there? Anyone in the room? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so we took on a very daring and risky conversation at one of the SIP sessions, and then from there we've just remained connected and conspiring ever since. My experience of you, Laura, has been one where you are at work while you're at work, meaning you are constantly working on yourself and understanding your own relationship with what's going on. And you've experienced some significant changes in your life in this past year. And you do that in this open and vulnerable way. And that's the work that you're doing with your clients too. What I always look for, I call it sort of the elite practitioner. The elite practitioner is one that does what they do because it's who they are, not their job. And you exemplify that because you're living your own truth, sharing it, and inspiring others to do the same. And it's just been amazing to know you and to be on that journey with you. So I'm going to get all sappy. So anyway, I'm going to hand it over. I'm going to hand it over to you, Laura, to take us on a journey today.
No, I really appreciate that. You know, you sometimes you wonder where your life is headed. Sometimes I often do, and never in a million years would I have imagined I would be here today, sitting with you on a terrace in Florida in the middle of a pandemic, talking about inspiration. So go figure. So yeah, we're going to talk about inspiration, and it seems as though, you know, in my 52 years, my world has come together personally, professionally, everything just is all now kind of simmering as one. I work for a firm called Inspire Core that was founded by 3 amazing women. And we are an inspiration strategy firm. And up until a couple of weeks ago, it felt we were ignited by that and excited by that. And now it's actually taken on an entirely new and interesting twist and turn. And so I want to kind of tell you a little bit about what it was then and what I think it actually looks like now and what this thing called inspiration is all about. And I'm really open, as Brent said, I'm really open and transparent and eager to hear your thoughts and insights about all of it. The reason that the firm came into existence was when these 3 women really 6-7 years ago started thinking about what does leadership, what do teams, what do organizations look like at their best? When they're really at their best, what does that look like? And the thing that kept coming up over and over and over again for them was inspiration. And so they're academics and practitioners. So they went to the literature to see what do we know about it? What did we write about it? What's been studied? And there wasn't a lot. And so a few years ago, about 4 years ago, our firm embarked on our original research as to what inspiration is. And this past November, our book, but theirs, called Dare to Inspire was released. And it really, defines what inspiration is on our end. It also really talks about what we think is the human code, right? We identified through our research 18 engines of inspiration that individuals reliably go to create it for themselves. Although it's very much like a fingerprint, what your inspiration, fingerprint is maybe quite different than mine. So, how we define inspiration, let's define it and then let's talk about it. And then it's really applicable right at this moment in time. We talk about it and have defined it as, imagine a Venn diagram where the first thing that is present is this overwhelming sense of possibility, right? Where there's an envisioning of what can be, what might be created in the future, a heightened sense of this possibility that is then intersected with a heightened sense of invincibility, and not a reckless invincibility, but invincibility that is an overwhelming confidence and courage that allows you to see a pathway towards what's possible. And it's a suspension of obstacles. It feels like a suspension of obstacles that allows you and actually propels you into action. And we add a third circle into the mix because we actually believe that it's a resource that can be activated. We believe that it's a muscle that can be trained, so that we add this other circle of intentional practice where our work in the world is to be able to bring this to people and say, we want you to identify what your inspiration code is, and we want you to be practicing that on a regular basis, because ultimately our work is about you, all of us, having our best days more often. Because if we are having our best days more often, the rest truly falls into place. And so that's the primer, the inspiration primer for you. And that's what the book talks about. And please feel free to interrupt or interject with questions that you may have. Here we are, though, in a pandemic. And we actually feel that inspiration is needed now more than ever before. We also think that inspiration has never been more prevalent than it is actually right now. And we went back to our 18 engines of inspiration, and despite the horrific nature of what we're experiencing on so many levels, that there are equally so many levels of our engines being activated all right now. And I can walk you through, I've chosen a few, but I guess I'd offer an invitation for a second. I don't know about you, but not an hour has gone by in the past couple of weeks. I was going to say a day, but it's actually more of an hour, where there has not been something I've seen or read or experienced that has not felt inspiring to me. And not all inspiration actually comes from something that is joyous or what we categorize as super positive. There's inspiration that's unlocked from all kinds of things. And so I'd be curious before I get into some other things, I'd be curious what some of your thoughts are on what's felt like inspiration actually right now in this moment in time.
Yeah, I'll go. I think that there is a level of truth telling that's existing right now, that folks are sharing a tremendous amount of the nitty gritty of who they are. They're sharing their fears. They're sharing their anti-system antagonism. They're sharing, the sense of oppression that they're feeling. The whole normalizing of all of these responses in volume has been just tremendously inspiring right now, and it's made so much space in that inspiration for so much more expression and clarity and sorting to take place.
I think also the sense of community, and again, it feels backwards because we're all in this really awful thing, but we're still all in it together. It's happening to everyone all over the world. And it's that, why can't we do this when things are good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Inspiration for me comes from belief. So like when I am reading a book and opening my mind to new ideas and learning new things, all of a sudden my belief system starts to widen and grow, and then this inspiration comes flowing in, right? It just comes like pouring in. And I think belief, for me at least, is connected to inspiration in a big way, in terms of like, if we don't believe that something's possible, then there's really no connection there to ideas growing or sprouting from anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Phew.
Anyone else? So I love it because you've just identified 3 of the 18 engines of inspiration just in the 3 comments, right? So, so Richard, you are talking about this. It's a collective vulnerability. There's inspiration and vulnerability, and there's this now total collective letting down of filters or or facades. Now there's I happen to love it. I've been loving these Zoom calls where little naked children are running through the background, and dogs are up with their noses in the camera. I happen to really love that. I think it draws us. Don't think vulnerability and transparency, it draws us closer to each other, which is part of what's making this collective vulnerability feel so inspiring and so connected, deepening and connection, right? Something we talk about in leadership, but then when you start to go into companies sometimes and start to talk about vulnerability and transparency, it's like, no, let's just stay with traditional leadership theory and principles, but we're getting a accelerated education on the competencies and the capabilities that can be strengthened when we do have a deepened sense of vulnerability. So you hit on that. That is one of the engines that we've identified in the book. Rebecca, you talked about this shared experience, this collective experience. That also, right? We know that, and we've done it sometimes. We gather in spiritual practice in churches, and there's big, huge gatherings. We do it in concerts. We do it at other conferences, right? They design to be inspiring. It's a collective gathering of people. This is a massive, massive shared experience, right? This is actually a global, worldwide shared experience. And therefore, it is igniting inspiration at entirely new levels, right? When could we ever have imagined that you could open your window in New York City at 7 p.m. at night and hear the sound of a city collectively applauding people, healthcare workers. I mean, like, what? Who would have imagined that you could just hear it in just the air, that that's going on? I mean, there's some really outrageously inspiring things that are being ignited by this shared collective experience that we're having together. So shared experiences that can be good and actually can be, you know, not ideal, right? Nobody wants to have this happen around a pandemic, but yes, this is what we're experiencing. And Donna, you're talking about, you know, we call it, it's kind of under the umbrella of unstructured think time. We actually think that we don't think that showed up in the research, unstructured think time, right? It's the thing when I go into companies, when we go into teams and we ask them what, you know, what they really need more of, what they need more of, they usually say is strategic think time, right? Time to think about strategy at higher levels. And what they're really saying is we need space. We need space for thinking and and you've thrown in kind of this, the learning aspect and belief. Really what you've talked about, it was belief. We captured some things in there that is progress or achievement in our other kinds of igniters and engines as well. But this unstructured think time, giving our brain spaces, and we can tell from how so many of us are experiencing this shelter at home and quarantine, that's in a really uncomfortable place for a lot of people. Some because they've got kids and animals and lots of people running around. Others because that enormous quiet, the dramatic increase in the amount of quiet and solitude is really deeply uncomfortable. But it also can provide a space for inspiration to happen, you know, if we allow it. So those are some great, you know, examples and your own descriptors of what some of the engines that we actually found in the research are. And so these are all being, it's like they're all being activated at the same time, all at once, around the world. So, I mean, I can keep talking, but if anyone has any questions, one of the things that I said to Brent was, because there are so many engines of inspiration being ignited at this very moment, it's kind of like where crisis meets creativity, right? When inspiration is ignited, it's where innovation, transformation, creation happens. It's where masterpieces are made. It's where, you know, transformative poems are written. It's where art is created. It's where ideation happens. So there's this incredible opportunity that is embedded in this painful, really painful time. So let me just push pause there.
Laura, something you had mentioned was something you just said triggered a thought that I had. When I've talked to friends during this entire thing, friends that have had like anxiety their entire life, my friends that are introverts, and you know, I'm assuming all of you have been getting, you know, you've been in group conversations through text and sending each other memes and like, you know, trying to keep it light. And there are memes out there about like anxiety and that what people with anxiety or introversion, they're kind of like not thriving, but they feel comfortable in this environment because it's in some way, in some capacity, it's not so different than how they typically feel. And anxiety runs the gamut. Not every case of anxiety looks the same. Introversion runs the gamut from introversion to ambiversion to extroversion. So it's amazing to see those different people in my circles and how they're thriving. Because you have my friends that are extroverts that are kind of going insane at home, while you have like the introverts with that kind of energy feeling more comfortable at home. But the other part of it was the creativity that you had mentioned, where I've seen people that from my friends or my colleagues or my network that aren't creative and they're going nuts. But then there are the ones that are creative and they are taking this time to do things even like this. To me, this is being creative because you're stepping outside, talking to different people from different backgrounds and growing. But it's amazing to see that who's taking advantage of the time to create, even though we all have families and kids and pets and other responsibilities. Any moment that we have, it's such a different world right now that some people are creating and others aren't. So you kind of get a view of who's who.
And creation looks a lot of different ways, right? Creation, for some, I'm a guest expert at Canyon Ranch. I have been for the past 5 years, and I tell a little story because I go up there and I love this gig because I do some workshops, but then I get pampered, and it's like, okay, there can't be a better gig than that. I get pampered and I get to do what I love. Win-win. But there's one little hallway of the facility I don't ever go down. And it's it's the art wing, right? I don't know where I ever got art shame, but I think I did because I walk past it like this every time I go. And I talk about stepping out of a comfort zone, and I'm like, boy, I'm really not walking the talk. So I made a commitment a year ago. The next time I went, I was going to do I was going to take one of their art experiences, and I took something called soul collage. I figured that's safe. I can cut things up and paste them together. So I thought, I'll just do that. So I went, and of course, it was not quite that. It was an incredibly beautiful experience, really deeply uncomfortable for me because I do not think of myself. I think of myself as really good creative on Excel, but not really great in other real art forms. And I had a really incredible experience and created this thing that I am so deeply proud of. And it was really amazing. And so I think, even for those who are quietly writing in their journals, or who are just even giving themselves permission to indulge in imagining, is a form of creativity. And so I think that all these things can produce inspired outcomes, perhaps, at some point or another, right? In whatever ways, even if that inspired creative output is a new awareness of self, right? I think that in and of it, that alone is a deeply creative and transformative outcome. So.
Hey, Laura, I have a question.
Sure.
In your experience, if you think about inspiration as an energy source, as an engine of change, you list all of these 18 engines of change. Do you see patterns in which of those produce the greatest sources of energy in organizations? Is there any pattern there? Is it truly individualistic? Curious to see which of those, you find resonate most widely or most deeply to unlock and activate positive change.
So it's such a great question because we've thought a lot about what does it look so we have frameworks for individual, for team, and for organization. And what we really love, when you think about organizations that are ordinarily perhaps focused on engagement, right, as this tool for driving performance and results and outcomes, we actually we hold this as it's a shared resource, meaning the responsibility for it, let's put it that way, is shared. So we want you as individuals to have what we call your own inspiration plan as part of your approach to your work in life. Actually, we want you to be looking at your time, your capacity, and making sure that the engines that drive your own inspiration are really rigorously embedded in a practice, right? So let's just say, for example, being in nature is a really big igniter. It's an engine for many, many people. Many people for whom that is an engine actually will tell you they do not get to be in nature in the ways that they would like. And we think that is, you know, if that's what you need to be at your best and to create, oh my good, then go find a tree for, you know, go out in the woods. And so we want you to know it and practice it. But there's also a responsibility of the organization to create the conditions for that to happen. You know, you can take responsibility, we can take responsibility for ourselves, but if an organization wants to hold innovation as a deeply held value and a deeply held competency for driving success into the future, they need to create a culture that creates the conditions for people to have inspiration embedded in their life, because that is what produces results sustainably. And especially today, where to Brent's point earlier, we're going to be creating the future, right? This is very different. This is weird. This is a whole new ball game for us. We actually do get to create it. And you can already see some of the innovation that's happening because people have been like just unleashed to, and a lot of them this particular time, because of all of those engines that are popping all over, people are all being ignited. And so all kinds of things are happening and we haven't even harnessed it, right? This has just been a kind of a, you know, it's not structured at the moment. It's unstructured, just happening as we're all adjusting. But imagine if we could harness that energy, if an organization could make sure that their individuals, their leaders, are practicing it themselves and igniting it in their people and their space for it, what could be possible? Imagine.
Yeah, I guess that's what's interesting to me is if you take those individual, whatever those sparks are for you individually, but then they all drive into the word on your list that somebody sent the link was that really resonated for me was the belonging one. That idea of, you know, here we are in this species level event. And so it's like, oh my gosh, we really are all in this together. We so forget that during the day, but you're really bringing that down to creating a culture of belonging, an inspired culture of belonging, where you can bring your individual cards and sparks and engines into the mix and find a common pool where that energy can gather and then get focused towards a purpose, a mission, a shared vision of the future. I can see how that starts to fit together into a kind of a model that is really cool.
How important it is for an organization to create an inspired purpose that is shared collectively by all, right? That's you know, if an organization really wants to drive performance and sustainable success into the future, it wants that purpose to be inspired and shared by all. We actually believe our premise is that inspiration in organizations it's directed at a vision, at a shared vision, right? This isn't about just everybody going out and being inspired all over. I mean, we love that, but at an organizational level, you want it directed. And the way to do that is to create the shared inspired purpose that everyone feels deeply and is aligned to, but that has the freedom then for you and I, based on who we are and what our inspiration fingerprint is, we know what we need to do to actually go out and ignite it. And what's so fascinating to me, and I wonder if you guys feel the same way, what I think has been bumped up on in this shared experience is trust. This collective remote experience, people who have not really held trust this is really hard for them. You know, our team can be virtual. We trust each other. We've built our core foundation on trust. So this is like, okay, we're aligned. We have a deeper shared purpose. We're going. For organizations or for teams who haven't built deep trust, this kind of everyone operating remotely is pushing up on that hugely. And that's a barrier, right? That's a barrier for this kind of inspired, for inspiration to happen. And those paradigms of control now, and it is not going to work. It's actually not going to work anymore going forward. And that's something that this shared experience is going to show us. I think is showing us in a hard way.
I'd like to toss in a real quick story. The last innovation course I built, and Trent was a guest, I decided that I would use Willie Nelson's book about his whole life as sort of the big read, and then I broke every session into some aspect of that. Well, here's the key to Willie. What Willie experienced in a way we're all experiencing, meaning that he had everything that money could buy, and then suddenly it was all gone. So the key quote that I wanted my students to believe in, no matter what else happened for the rest of their time, was Willie said, as long as I can think up a song and play it on a guitar, I'll always have a future. Yeah. So what it was is, what do you got when everything else is gone? Well, Willie had this wonderful talent and his belief that he could write songs that people would want to listen to and pay for. And he had an instrument to do it. So in a way, each of our practices boil down to, what do you got when everything else is gone? And that's what I've been kind of struggling with, because for many years I had all the advantages of unemployment status, which defined me without any effort on my part. You know, a college professor. When I retired, that was gone, and I had to work hard to get that out of my life in a positive way and be Dave, which Trent will remember and Jessica will remember was my challenge. Just be Dave. Because that took me down to, what have I got? Well, what I have, real quick, was I have a good ear and good people who want to talk, and I recorded with Peter Vail. I cited in my doctoral mentor from 50 years ago. I recorded a number of deep conversations about the nature of practice, and he passed away last week. So I'm on my own on that now, but I'm going to continue it, because that's what I have, an ability to share good conversation about topics that matter, particularly to the world. Practice matters. Thanks.
I think that's beautiful, and I so appreciate that, because you actually identify even one other engine, which is strengths activation, right? You're talking about like it isn't necessarily even a talent, because a lot of people won't identify, like I would never say I have a talent, but I love that, you know, but I do have strengths. And so, you know, a tool that one of the only kind of assessment tools we use is a strengths-based tool that is called, and you can look it up. It's a wonderful tool called Via Character Strengths. And if you don't know it, you can take it online at viacharacter.org. And we use that because one of the greatest indicator of fulfillment is in being able to utilize your strengths every day and be acknowledged for them.
Yeah.
And again, you can see that actually just happening naturally in this particular moment in time. And people are activating their strengths, the things that they do best. And that could be a listening ear, right? I'm here to just listen. I'm really good at it. And this is a time when people need that. I can do that. And so you'd be surprised. I was very surprised, well, a little bit surprised when I took my Via Character, because it's not a talent or skills assessment. And so people, and you have to remember, I should say this since I've recommended that you think about taking it. They're all strengths. People see that it kind of ranks you from, there's 24 strengths, and people often look at the one at the bottom and go, oh my God, I'm horrible at that. No, those are 24 strengths. No weaknesses. So, but it is really interesting. And this, it is a time where I think we're all looking at what's going on around us and thinking, how can I contribute to this?
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, he can sing. I can't.
Well, I can sing, just nobody would want to listen, right? I get belt it out at home.
Prove it.
Yeah.
Love what you said, Laura, about the balance in an organization, you know, to provide that common goal for inspiration, but allow people the freedom. Because I do think for a lot of companies and organizations, they get stifled by structure, you know, and they get in their own way. And even in this short time where I was working from home anyway, but some friends who had traditional office jobs, there was a reluctance from their leaders to let them work remotely until it was really forced. And even then it's kind of like some days in the office, some days out of the office. And one of my friends had said her boss commented like, oh, good to see you in the office, like physically at her desk. And she had said, like, I wanted to tell him that I spaced out at my computer for like the last 3 hours, you know, while she was in the office, where at home, like her time was focused. And, you know, and anyone who has the ability or experience of working from home, you know, sometimes, yeah, those money business hour days are not the best days, but man, you can pack out something amazing from like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and you still meet your deadline, and it's beautiful because you're thriving in your own respect. And I do think it will be so interesting to see how things shake out, you know, to Brent's questions, like what if we abandoned that would be beneficial to leave behind, and how will we adjust?
I love the question. I think this is something organizations are going to grapple with. You know, I've heard this is where internally we talk about where this is a moment in time where you see really, you see some serious Yoda leadership, right? Really amazing. They get it. And then you see some Darth Vader, like you see some bad stuff going on, right? Where people were forcing their people to go into the office. Imagine the fear on fear on fear to put people in an office because you think that's going to drive productivity. Are you crazy, people? Where have you lost your mind? Then you layer that kind of fear, and now you think because they're sitting in your office space, that somehow equals, like really, if we step back, it's kind of crazy town. But on the other hand, I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation because we all know there are morning people and night people. There are people who, you know, are activated, their best is activated at different times and in different ways. And so this conversation, this experience and experiment, I think is going to, is going to produce some very interesting outcomes. And I think that there are people who are going to say, boy, maybe we are producing more or better and are happier with some of these new practices.
So I just wrote down, you know, based on the inquiry, I wrote down a statement here about one of those things we want to leave behind, which is a mindset that being in the office means productivity. We need to let that one go.
Totally. It's kind of like now that we've stepped away from it, we can look and say, it's kind of like being woken up. Like, what were we thinking? Right. You know, and the other thing is, we had started to ramp up because of the book release travel. And one of our founders said to me the other day, things I think might have been getting out of hand, like my schedule, my travel, like, what if this now puts us in an environment going forward where I won't have to do that as much and be away from my 10-year-old, so much of the week. And I hope, I'm all for convening again and bringing us all together in live experiences, and I miss that terribly. But I do think, as I've looked around at a lot of leaders and professionals, the sacrifice and the toll that it's taken to travel in the ways that we've started to look at travel and work is kind of, I think that's also going to be shaken up quite dramatically.
Well, even early on, there was that meme that was like, now we'll really see which meetings could have been emails all along.
Yeah. Yeah. And where our presence in our homes can collectively make a difference as well in an entirely other way, right? So I think there's a lot of inquiry and invitation here, given what we're going through, that are going to have profound effects on the new shape of work, and also how we can be at our best and produce even greater results. Because I'll tell you, the companies, the leaders who have been in Yoda mode and who are really really kind of activating inspiration at all these levels, they're going to see real, talk about performance excellence. They're going to see it. They're going to see it in their organizations.
I just want to.
I want to share a screen for 1 second. I think you'll all appreciate this. Alexa, just drop this.
Yay!
Where's the like button?
Yeah, right. That's amazing.
I want to quickly add something about meetings. I had a manager at IBM. This was back in the 90s. He had a very good prophetic saying. And IBM was notorious for meetings. We just had meetings after meeting. He said, meetings are good provided there are no chairs in the room. I think you remember.
That's awesome.
I actually saw that at Praxair, and I practiced it at Pratt for a while. We had a much smaller room, a table which is like 42-inch high, only 7 people can stand around it, and there's a whiteboard, and there's a 20-minute limit to be in that room. Come prepared, stand up, put your piece of paper on the table, talk about it, and out. The other way to look at it is it was like a water cooler conversation, but identifying a spot where you can do it.
Laura, you probably your team's probably been following the Gallup in employee engagement research year after year, and I used to get more and more troubled because one of the maybe 17% of all surveyed, 60 amazing number of samples, were fully engaged, which I would then say fully inspired. And then there's a bunch in the middle, as always. And then there's a whole lot who were still collecting a paycheck. You know, like we've talked about a moment ago, they're at the office, their eyes were moving, but they weren't thinking. And so I hope that 2 years from now, when Gallup surveys, 2 things. One, it'll be more companies led by people who are Yoda-like and inspiring. Therefore, there will be a whole larger percentage of people whose companies have been just transformed that way, and/or who have moved their practices to those companies because they don't want to be stifled anymore. So it's, but that, I think Gallup will give us a canary study over the next couple of years, as long as they can still do that research. I hope they will.
We're often asked, where does it belong in an organization, right? Where does this thing called inspiration actually belong? Where does it live? What does it looks like operationally? And I think a good place to start in people is we actually think it belongs in the in development planning and performance management, right? there's KPIs, we get it. We get that there's metrics that have to be met and goals that have to be achieved. Totally get that. But what's often left out of that is, so what juices you, right? What drives you? What, how are you going to get to that, reach and exceed that KPI? And we actually, as a firm, our definition of leader is not just inspiring, a shared mission, which we talked about earlier, but we actually believe that it doesn't count if you reach your goals if your people are spent. We actually only believe leadership counts if you've done that and your people are growing stronger at the same time. They have come out of that drive with additional capability and competency, and that they are even more, I guess I would say, even more inspired. So we think it belongs in that process, which for most organizations is a radical thing, right? They've got a form, a 1 through 4, whatever it is.
Scale.
So we really want this to be embedded in there, and think that makes really strong teaming.
I think the other side of that is when a company is on a high side of people who have exceeded goals, the other side to look at is the customers who appreciate it and who recognize it and who take their business to that. Then they'll take it to where the price is low, but so are the people. You know what I mean? And maybe that's another awareness that we'll get when we come out the other side, and because we're going to have a much cleaner need to be buying from, having services from good people who are excited. That would be such a great marketing thing.
Yeah.
Laura, I would even say it's almost like don't even wait for the organization to implement that kind of policy like KPIs and whatnot. It's amazing how much people forget what little actions they put out into the world, what kind of ripple effect that can put out there. Because I'm sure everybody here has carried out an action or said something, and the other person may have looked at them and said, whoa, yeah, we never thought about that. Or no one ever says that. And so it's amazing what little things everybody throughout the hierarchy, even if you try to inspire somebody else seeing that kind of opens up and gives them permission to do the same forward.
You've hit it, John. It's a leader's job. And by the way, we believe a leader is you lead from where you are. So there's no hierarchy or compensation that determines that. But a leader's first job is to inspire self and show what that looks like to do. And so you're totally spot on. Totally spot on with that.
A friend.
And here, what?
I was just going to say a friend had recently shared exactly what John's talking about. Again, one of those situations, they wanted someone to come into the office and he was 25 years old and he said, I'm not going to. He's like, I'll do what I can from home or you can fire me, but it's not worth it. And then like the next day the company called back and was like, you're right, we're changing. And like people were able to work remotely.
I love that. And here's the other thing, Brent knows I'm, as my children would say, you're overshare, Mom. But I am a super transparent person and I've known no other way because I truly believe it's the shared collective vulnerability. Like I'm not alone in what I'm experiencing. And so if I can put words to it, and I'm pretty good with words, then it actually just allows people to identify and do the same. And so John, what I've come to realize is I actually have always underrepresented or underbelieved that my own impact. And I do have people that come around 2-3 years later and will say, I heard you say this, or I read this thing you wrote, and it actually totally ignited something for me. So I believe in oversharing, and I believe in offering, and people process at their own rates and they apply it to themselves in their own ways.
I mean, without using that word woke, like in the traditional sense that it's been used in culture, there are a lot of people where all it takes is a little spark, just to not remind them because they haven't been aware of it, but just to introduce them to a new way of thinking. That they don't even, it's not that they see a new way of thinking and they're not sure about it. They haven't even considered it. They haven't been exposed to it. So it's a matter of just introducing, just even a little by little. And the results that you can see through that person and throughout the organization is just, the sky's the limit, in all honesty.
Tremendous.
I just wanted to jump in real quick too, because I think that all this conversation about inspirational leadership at all levels, I work in the DEI space, and I think, you know, DEI is important strategically always, but even more so right now because the diverse needs of our employees are so, they're so different, whether you're working in the field or you're working at home, or you need mental health, conversations or time off or whatever that is. And this is a critical time as inspirational leaders at any level for us to really, really think about that. And I think even more so too, because there are things that are put in our face that create barriers that are confusing, for the mind. For example, I got out a couple days ago to the post office to mail some care packages. And I'm standing in the post office line and a young couple and an elderly woman nearly got into a big altercation. And part of that was fear and confusion. And are you 6 feet away from me? Are you not 6 feet away from me? Are you wearing gloves? Are you not wearing gloves? Do you have a mask? Did you wipe your hands? And those barriers that we're putting in place for our safety trigger the mind to think of separation from other. And so that flies in the face of our ideas of inclusivity. And it's not meant to be, scary. It's meant to be safe. But the brain is like, oh, separating you from me. And so as leaders at any level, we have to really be thinking about how we are being inclusive of others in the face of structural barriers, systemically or physically or whatever those are, for our safety. And this isn't a time where that's really, really important to creating inspiration, is how do I bring everyone together to think inclusively in a time where we're all forced to be separate?
That's so beautiful, Karen. It's so beautifully stated, because it's so true with so much fear going on. One of the cornerstones of a time like this in crisis in business is to over communicate. Communicate. So the more that you, what you just said is so beautiful. I wish, it is recorded. Oh, this is so beautiful. To take exactly that and just continue to to reinforce that message that to people, so that they remember, okay, yes, this is about some physical distancing, but this is not about disconnecting in any kind of way. It's a protective. And so the more we can just reinforce and over communicate, I know we're going to come up on time shortly, but I want to make sure Brent, we have some free resources we compiled, just stuff I'll send to you just for anyone who might want them for use in this time. For us, one of our engines is just serving and supporting this entire community. So whatever we can do to serve and support, or me, us, anyone, but just that was really beautiful, Karen. It was a reminder for me. I probably am not communicating that message enough around my own little sphere.
All right, well, we are wrapped up here at 12:31. Just want to bring us to a close, respect everybody's time. Laura, thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you.
That was awesome. And thank you, everyone's thoughts and ideas. Question for you. We are recording these. I haven't shared the recordings, but everyone's been asking, are you guys okay if I start posting the recordings of these?
Sure.
Okay, let me know privately. If anyone's got an issue with it, just let me know. But I want to get them posted. I just wanted to check in with you first. Wow, so this has been awesome.